Recording in progress. That's where we want to be. Um, okay. Right. So we said we're going to talk about, please God, free will. That is the plan. Now, before we start, I once had a student who didn't believe in free will. Really interesting. I've had students tell me various things over the years, but never this. A student who said, Rabbi, I really don't believe in free will. Interesting, right? Now, it happened to be they were the son of a rabbi, which made it even more interesting. So, I mean, I don't know how you would have approached that. If someone says to them, they were 19 at the time, they said, I don't believe in free will. Well, what does that mean? Like, how do you take that?
Maybe ask how he thinks or she thinks the world operates.
Right, right. Yeah. The cheeky part of me wanted to like take his wallet and then see if he got upset. Because if you got upset, then clearly there's free will. You know what I mean? But I think most of us assume intuitively that there's free will, because if there's no free will, as we'll learn about, nothing is meaningful.
I don't think that proves there's free will. It might
Well,
be that he was destined to take the wallet. He was destined to get angry. It doesn't prove free will.
um, interesting. You mean he'd come back at that and say, well, it was all going to
Uh,
happen.
that, that doesn't prove anything. I was just meant to get angry. That would not be a proof.
Okay, all right. Yeah, but if all right, if he felt his I hear that. Okay. I think most of us intuitively believe or understand, I should say more than believe, it's not an esoteric belief, intuitively understand that there's free will. And that means that we are responsible and accountable, and more importantly, can celebrate our actions. Right? You know, if there's no free will, you'd never ever be able to receive an award, a reward, a pat on the back, a prize, being proud of what you've done. It's just what you're chemically engineered or, philosophically, excuse me, predestined to do. Yeah. Um, so let's discuss free will and how it works. Now, firstly, anyone who has children will know that free will is a hot topic at home. I don't mean that there's a philosophical debate about free will in most Jewish homes or any homes. I mean, whenever a child does something wrong, obviously not in your homes, in another home, and you say, well, why did you do that? Or what happened here, right? And they say, nah, I didn't mean to, wasn't me, I'm not responsible, etc. So willing or not, they're dancing around the free will kind of pole, if you like. In other words, free will is what glues our action together in terms of making them meaningful. So what I want to do is I'd like to do a bit of a scan of the chapter, I should say. In other words, what we're planning to cover over this week, maybe next week and the week after, see how quick we go on this one. And then I'm going to bring it back to the very basics. Good? Okay, so this week, not this week, the topics are as follows. Number one, we're going to do a bit of a rare thing, which is free will in the headlines. Just want to tell you some interesting free will cases in the news. And then after that, I've got what is the purpose of free will? Why do we have it? Can we prove it? And then we've got is free will equal? In other words, 50-50 versus not 50-50. How do those choices work? Are they yes free will, no free will, less free will, more? Do people have more free will than others? And after all of that, we've got the key free will, I call them challenge points, meaning how can we have free will if God knows the future? Can my free will impact someone else? That's Gideon, your wallet case. If I stole from someone, does that mean they deserved it, or I overrode God's plan for the world, etc.? We'll deal with that properly and slowly. And other individual cases, how could God harden Pharaoh's heart? That's taking away free will. It's not fair. And then a couple of little bits towards the end as well. And that is our massive free will chapter. All good? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see if I can. Hold on a second. Let me just get the right document over here. I'd like to see if I can share. Oh, free will. See if I can share this document. Let me know if it's anything come up yet. No, 1 second. Sorry, I haven't done it properly. So basically, what I'm going to do over here is show you, hopefully, if it works, free will in the news. But no, let me find it here. Share on. Here we are. Okay. All right, this should work. Let me know now if you can. Oh, So my operating Zoom isn't what it once was. There we are. Okay, can you see this? Can't see this? Can't see
Yeah.
this? Okay, so there's 3 or 4 cases which I think are really, really interesting in terms of opening up this topic of who, yes, has free will, who doesn't have free will. Um, is there, or maybe are there people who don't have free will at all? Is there such a thing? If we talk about, and here's the case study, kleptomania, in other words, some form of genetic predisposition towards theft, right? And there are people like this. There are kids like this, by the way, as well. More than one case of someone of kids with such things, stealing sweets, stealing other things. And they like sometimes can rarely be control themselves. But have a look at this and see where free will comes in. Okay, so the basic question is: if you're genetically predisposed to do something, do you have free will? Are you accountable, etc.? So here we go. Shoplifting, you see the highlighted paragraph, is clearly a psychological issue for many people. For most individuals, shoplifting is not about greed or poverty, but rather people struggling with their own personal conflicts and needs. The more intense form of shoplifting is classified in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders as an impulse disorder known as kleptomania. Today, kleptomania is considered far more prevalent than originally believed. Yeah, everyone heard of kleptomania? I'm going for silence means yes. Okay, right. Here we go, kleptomania. Right. I've got over here 2 examples, which I think are quite shocking, of kleptomania, of people who stole stuff when it's ridiculous to do so. And then I've got a bit more of a jarring example, if you don't mind. So the first is as follows. Sharon had been shopping at the local Eaton's department store on January 30th. This is, by the way, straight from news articles. He tried to walk out with 2 tweed jackets. When he was stopped by Eaton's security, he tried to make a run for it, but he was apprehended and detained. Eaton pressed charges for theft. Still, even when he was finally able to leave the store, Sharon kept his mouth shut about the arrest. He was hoping Eaton's would not press charges given his public profile. He had not told his premier, you've got to help me with this, René Levesque. Yeah, good enough?
Good enough.
Thank you. On February 24th, the date he pleaded guilty to the charges in a Montreal courtroom, he resigned his cabinet position, government house leader. The total value of the items he stole, or he'd stolen, was $120. Imagine. Sharon had been earning $74,000 a year in his cabinet post, and when he resigned, his income immediately dropped to $42,000. Yeah, so that's quite a stark example of
What's amazing about that story is I think these are Canadian dollars, and you could get 2 tweed jackets for 120 of them.
Right, off to Canada, everyone. Yeah, it wasn't quite the point I was looking for out of the story, but yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's good. It's good. Side, yeah. All learning is good, Gideon. Yeah, so that's quite an interesting one, right? Now listen to this. In 2001, international millionaire actress Miss Winona Ryder tried to make off with thousands of dollars of clothing and hair accessories. She was 30 at the time of the shoplifting. Her theft had all the hallmarks of kleptomania. Ryder did not need the items. The theft was extremely awkward, almost a plea for help. She later blamed the theft on her painkillers. She was fined over $6,000. Okay, so again, another example of theft, which we would say is not an equal choice. It's certainly caused by outside factors. Could argue that a lot of things wrong are caused by outside factors, but nevertheless, this was an unnecessary theft, and it kind of gets back to kleptomania. Good? Yeah? Okay, good. Now, I'll give you one other example of free will. It's kind of free will fault line, which is again a bit jarring, but this is it. So this is the official Yad Vashem archives of the Eichmann trial. This is a quote from it. I'm assuming just background, I'm assuming we all know who Adolf Eichmann was. There's a footnote about it here. He was responsible for the overseeing and organizing deaths of 100,000 Jews. In fact, he was apart from being part of the final solution, he was the architect of the final solution in Hungary towards the end of the war. I mean, I think it was about 800,000 Jews in Hungary who, until 1944, if my history is correct, were left alone to a certain degree And Adolf Eichmann was in charge of executing the final solution in Hungary in 1944 and sent hundreds of thousands never to Auschwitz. Right, so he was, as we know, he was taken from Argentina after the war. Many Nazis escaped to South American countries. Eichmann was one of them. He was, remember, captured by Mossad. There was a tip-off as to where he was, and etc., etc. The scary thing was, by the way, and this is not the point now, but there were a lot of former Nazis that made their way to South American countries, and some of them were not even hiding particularly well. There was a whole like Nazi operation, not in terms of doing anything against the Jews, but just in terms of there were like newspapers in German and clubs and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so Adolf Eichmann was taken by the Mossad and brought back to Israel, where he famously stood trial. Okay, 1962. Well, eventually 1962. It took quite a while. So here's a quote from the Yad Vashem archives of the Eichmann trial. It says as follows: "The defense did not really question the facts related to these events, meaning Eichmann himself, his defense, nor did they challenge the authenticity of the documents, proving Eichmann's involvement in the crimes." Okay? Meaning he didn't deny who he was, didn't deny what he had done. But the systematic defense line was to play down Eichmann's role in the process by depicting him as a small cog in the machinery of murder, an underling who had no choice. That's what I wanted from this. No choice but to carry out the orders he was given by his superiors. That's what he was claiming. Right? And the court rejected his claim, and we know what happened to him. So if I throw out the questions, we have three cases here. Right? I'm just going to stop sharing now. We have three cases, right? We had case number one, if you remember, was the Sharon, assuming that's how you pronounce his name, who forwent, I guess, his cabinet position in Montreal, stealing. Case number two is Miss Winona Ryder, similar thing, although not in politics, unnecessary stealing. Case number three was Eichmann. What say you? In other words, what say you about free will? Two cases of theft and one case of mass murder, but saying he was compelled. He couldn't run away. He couldn't, whatever it was. Right? What say you about free will and therefore accountability? Meaning, bottom line, if there's no free will, there's no accountability. Right? So how do we work that out?
Yeah, if you could understand, certainly in the first two cases, a degree of understanding why something was done, but I imagine there still must be some sort of free will. It's kind of like any addiction. Can you say no to the cigarette or the gambling or whatever it might be? The defense for Eichmann sounds like the only legal option they had, like meaning that doesn't really feel any that's manufactured. That I don't think you can say
I mean,
that's
it's not true. You're
yeah.
saying it's not true. And had it been true, let's say, for argument's sake, let's say it was true. So let's say you said, look, I couldn't, what could I do? I was thrust into the position, no easy way to get out of it. Let's say the facts. Let's I mean, I've never taken on face
Well,
value, obviously, but let's say
and then you've got a moral choice. Like, is it right for you? Meaning nothing to do with is it right for you to continue with your job, which you're being forced to do, which is going to result in 800,000 people being murdered, or do you stand up for that and say no? I don't like. I don't see that that's um, a defense.
right. Okay, good, excellent. We're going to get to that. Good. Okay, Jonathan, I can see you're aching to say something. No?
Well, you can almost say like he had 800,000 opportunities to decide, like to not make that decision, and each time he decided to kill someone.
Right. Okay. Right. Put it like that. Yeah. You can
And also the first two examples, it only really affected them.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, and therefore, therefore they're less culpable.
Yeah, it just affected them. It didn't affect thousands and thousands of people and their family and their descendants and to infinity and beyond, did it? It just affected them. I've seen someone out of compulsion accidentally burn themselves on cooking and then purposefully burn their other hand so that it was the same as their
Really?
original accidental burn hand.
Wow.
Yeah, and like, why did you do that? Like, I didn't help it. I didn't want to burn myself, but like you wouldn't burn yourself on purpose just because you wanted to burn yourself. But it was a compulsion, and they had to burn themselves to match the accidental burn.
Wow.
So
There's also
it's like you literally can't help it, but that affects you when it's one time. Like all the subsequent times that person's cooked, they haven't felt compelled to burn themselves again. So the
right.
third example is over and over and over
Right.
again,
So,
and far, 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 far reaching.
right. You're saying that over and over again makes it much more culpable. Yeah, it's funny. I want to take this away from mass murder for a second. We had a philosophical discussion at home today. I'll tell it to you. A certain member of my family is constantly late to be taken to school, meaning they're the one that holds up the school run. Yeah. So the philosophical discussion today was, is it their fault? meaning their defense, so to speak, so they're not on trial, was, well, and it happens to be this, and I want to finish my breakfast, and I'd rather leave, put my breakfast away rather than things being messy, all that kind of stuff. But sum total, it's a massive rush to get to school every morning, right? Now, my argument, albeit a male one, is you're right, but that's your choice. You put yourself in that situation, right? To which their argument is, yeah, I know, but it's like really hard. I say, I know it's really hard, but it's still a choice, right? So what we're going to see, and it's going to take us a couple of elements to get there because I want to get the base first, is that the fact that a choice is difficult doesn't mean that there's no free will.
There must be some cases of where free will maybe doesn't exist. I'm thinking of people who haven't got mental capacity, things like that. There must be cases.
Yes, of course there are. Of course there are. There definitely can be. But the fact that a choice is difficult doesn't mean there's no free will.
Isn't it more, I would say the when if a choice is difficult, that is almost proof of free will, because otherwise if everything was simple, you'd almost do things autonomously like a robot. You do things automatically like a robot. The fact that something is difficult and challenging, and you have to overcome a voice in your head that's saying don't do it, right? Or I can't do it, then suddenly that is proof of free will, I think, in some respects.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Yeah, that certainly justifies it, mate. Yeah, 100 necessitates free will. I mean, most meaningful choices we make in life are very rarely like equally poised. Certainly when we look back at them, even if we were kind of really deliberating over them at the time, they're very, very rarely 50-50 equals, right? That's free will is important there, right? Meaning where we're trying to angle at is, yes, decisions are difficult, but free will still exists. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a big difference between a choice which is 50-50, as equally weighted, I can choose good or bad, versus, let's say, 98% is pulling me to the bad and 2% to the good, right? You may still have free will. Let's take kleptomania. We're going to flesh this out better next week. But kleptomania, yeah, of course, you're compelled to choose negative, right? Because you're being pushed, right? But as long as you can haul yourself back to positive, you've still got free will. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean you're equally culpable as someone whose choice was 50-50.
I wonder whether we need to further define this, because I was thinking that there are definitely difficult choices to be made, which I don't know whether they qualify as free in the sphere of free will at all. Speaking personally, we thought we decided, and now we're undecided again, which school to send our son to for his A levels. That doesn't feel like such a free will choice. I wonder if free will has to have some sort of moral element to it. Is I guess what.
Yeah, yes, you meaning if you're choosing the difference between, should I have I don't know, pizza or schnitzel for supper tonight? Yeah, according to everyone but my teenage son, that's not a moral decision. In other
Yeah,
words,
that's also not such a difficult decision. I'm choosing school, which is going to impact, that still I'm not sure feels like it's a free
that, of
will.
course, that would certainly be a decision which is governed by classic free will, because that's a moral choice. You're weighing up what's best in terms of education and building and developing your child long term. For sure that is. Yeah, for sure that is. And meaningless decisions, free will was not given for that. You might still have free will. You can still choose between the black jumper or the blue jumper, right? But you wouldn't get reward for that. That's not kind of exercising your free will muscle, so to speak. It might help you with the decision-making skills, but that's not our free will muscle, right? But 100%, any decision that has moral implications, well, 100%, right? And you can have decisions that are relatively benign, but will have moral impacts. Should I go for a run now or not? Like, well, if I'm going for a run now and not helping at home, it becomes a moral decision, not just a, decision of exercise, right? 100%. Okay, so let's start with a few minutes we have left, with just a little bit of proof of the existence of free will, and see if we can briefly touch on purpose. And then we're going to define free will a little bit better. Please go next week. Okay, so it starts as follows. And how can we, it's a bit funny, other than our instinct, in other words, instinctively we feel we have free will, and I get that, and that's true as well. Other than our instinct, can we prove, a bit funny, that we have free will? Right, other than our instinct. Now, instinct is fine, but we're given a moral fiber and instinct, and that could very well be it. That's fine, right?
Aren't there certain tests, right? Like when you're faced with, I suppose we were saying before, like a moral dilemma. There's that test in there of like, should I save? If I had the choice between saving a child and an old person, or one child or 100 old people, which one would I choose? Something along those lines. That's you ultimately you have the free will to choose which path you take.
That's true. But you could go with the Gideon argument and say, well, that was either predestined or chemically, you just chose what you were kind of led to choose through your chemicals and genes and whatever it was, or it's predestined. I deal with predestination a lot. So Jewishly, the way the Rambam puts it, it's a lovely little piece. He says like this. I'm actually going to give you the English here. He says a fascinating thing. He says a lot of unschooled people, he's writing 900 years ago, think that God decrees from a person's very inception they're going to be righteous or wicked. Right? That's what a lot of people.
But did you say unschooled?
Yes, unschooled, meaning this is the incorrect way of thinking. Yeah, the incorrect way of thinking is to assume that God, from the very inception, from your very beginning, says, right, he's going to be righteous, or she's going to be righteous, he's going to be wicked, she's going to be wicked. Okay? Says the Rambam that it's completely wrong. Completely wrong. Each person, from their being very young, can choose to be a tzaddik or rasha, meaning good or bad, so to speak. And in fact, he gives examples. He says you can be the biggest tzaddik like Moshe, right? Like Moshe, the biggest tzaddik, using your potential, or the biggest wicked person, and he names people, names a person. Yeravam, who caused the entire Jewish nation to sin, serve idols. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. You can be wise, meaning you can use your wisdom for positive. You can be stupid, meaning use your wisdom for negative. Or Rahman, you can have mercy on people. You can be cruel. You can be generous. You can be stingy. Anything else. Anything. Says the Rambam, there's no one forcing you to any of these two things. Right? And then he continues, and he says, free will has to be there. And again, purpose we're going to do next week, but free will has to be there, because if it's not there, then how can there be any moral instruction in the Torah? How can the Torah tell you this is a mitzvah and this is a bad thing, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, if if you're anyway going to do that, or that? What's the point of the Torah? What's the point of any prophet coming along and telling you, right, Jewish people, repent? Well, repentance.
How's the Rambam dealing with the kleptomania then?
And not fully yet. No, not fully. We're just doing the framework first. We're dealing with if there's no free will whatsoever. We haven't worked out what qualifies as free will. Right? The Rambam's saying it has to be this free will, otherwise what's God telling you what to do? If you're just actors in a pre-written script, then moral things that are good and bad are totally irrelevant, because you're already, I would say, chosen. You haven't. You've already been predestining your, destination. It's the driverless cars problem, right? Driverless cars will just drive by themselves. Right? What's the point in having traffic laws for driverless cars? right? Only to pre-program them in, but then, let's say driverless car crashes. And by the way, the insurance companies are grappling with this. The driverless car crashes is their fault, and who pays? Right? It's just pre-programmed. It's a good question, right? Good question. There was an insurance company conference not too long about this, a couple of years ago, right? If we are driverless cars throughout our time in this world, no free will, then you can't hold us accountable. You can't tell someone off, you can't reward someone, or nothing, right? Absolutely nothing, right? So the Rambam's basic point is it has to be, and again, the why we'll do soon, but next week actually, but it has to be that there's free will. Otherwise, any moral instruction, any award, any reward, any punishment, any accountability is out the window, right? You don't, at the end of a play or a film, you don't, the person who's the villain, right? Of the film, you don't hate them. I mean, you might hate them, but you only hate their character because you've got used to it, unless they're the protagonist, right? But, you don't, they're acting. That's not them. Yeah, that's not them. If we're actors, then I think everything's meaningless. So please God, next week, we're going to look at this a little bit deeper. We're going to get into the question of 50-50, things that are not 50-50 choices, how do they rate? Yes, free will, less accountability, more. We'll see that, please God, properly. We'll also talk about things that are beyond and beneath us. In other words, if they're decisions that we can't possibly get to at the moment, how does that work? And then we're going to get to some of the thorny free will issues, please God. Good? All right. Everyone should have a wonderful evening. Keep well. Good to see everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.